I am Amelia Rowe. I'm 33, and at my father's 65th birthday party, my mother looked me dead in the eye and said, "We all agreed, you're not welcome here." She didn't flinch. No raised voice, no drama, just cold certainty in her tone, like I was a spilled drink at a polished table, something to be cleaned up and forgotten. Behind her, my sister sipped wine, my aunt pretended to straighten a vase, and my father, my quiet, academic, world-respected father, stood there, hands in pockets, avoiding my eyes, like I was a stranger at his doorstep. That night, they erased me, but what they didn't realize was I had already erased the part of me that still needed their approval, because a week before that party, while helping organize the slideshow for Dad's legacy celebration, I stumbled on a document in the attic, a name I didn't recognize, a hospital I'd never been to, a mother that wasn't mine. They didn't know I knew, and when they told me to leave, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I walked away, but not before plugging in a new version of that slideshow, the one they never saw coming. I didn't destroy the party. They did that on their own. All I did was give them a mirror. And now? It's been a year. A year since they tried to bury me in silence. A year since they pushed me out of the only home I ever knew. And today, after all the cold shoulders, the lies, the perfectly curated betrayals. My mother's texting me. Can we talk? No, but I'll tell you the story. Not for them, for the girl I used to be, the one who stood outside that house with a USB drive in one hand and a heart full of wounds no one bothered to see. You want to know what happens when a family chooses image over truth? Sit tight. Let's begin. I'm a senior forensic accountant. I work for a global compliance firm in New York City. People pay me to find hidden patterns, expose buried truths, and follow the numbers others try to bury. Ironically, I never thought I'd need those skills in my own family, but that's how betrayal works. It doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people who once tucked you into bed, kissed your scraped knees, and told you they'd never let anyone hurt you. What they don't mention is that sometimes they're the ones holding the knife. I wasn't the problem child. I wasn't reckless or difficult. I wasn't loud or dramatic. I didn't break curfews or date troublemakers. I studied. I worked part-time. I paid for my own college through scholarships and tutoring jobs. I built a life that didn't depend on them. And maybe that was my mistake. Because in families like mine, independence is betrayal. My mother, Judith, was the curator of perfection. Not love, not warmth. Presentation. She was sharp, beautiful, and relentless in managing how the rows were perceived. Church photos in coordinated pastels, holiday letters edited like press releases. No one saw the manipulation. No one saw how she chipped away at anything she couldn't control. My father, Edward, was the absent presence, a tenured professor, respected, brilliant, and emotionally unavailable. He didn't yell. He vanished into books, into lectures, into silence. And then there was my sister, Leah, 3 years younger, social media darling, always saying the right thing, always doing the wrong one, but getting away with it because she looked angelic in every frame. Leah was chaos in Chanel, the kind of daughter who wrecked cars and called it character building. And Judith? She cleaned it up. Always. They called me the serious one. Cold. Unsentimental. I wasn't. I just stopped handing them soft parts of myself to tear apart. You see, the problem wasn't that I didn't belong in that family. It was that I remembered too much and asked questions they didn't want to answer. Like why there were no baby photos of me before age 2. Why my medical files started mid-childhood. Why my mother refused to discuss my birth, even in passing. I let it go, for years, until I didn't. And when I started digging, quietly, carefully, they felt it. Judith grew colder. Leah got defensive. My father went even quieter. But I wasn't going to stop. I wasn't 16 anymore. I wasn't scared. And I was tired of playing a role in a family drama that was never written for me. So, when I say the party was never about balloons and speeches and celebrating Dad, I mean it. It was a test to see if I would stay silent, and when I didn't, they made their choice. But so did I. They chose appearances. I chose truth. They chose legacy. I chose clarity, and that night, while they smiled under string lights and toasted family, I stood alone, outside their perfect little picture. But I wasn't broken. I was done, and that was the beginning. The Rows weren't rich, but they were excellent at pretending to be. We lived in a meticulously renovated colonial-style house in Connecticut. White columns, manicured hedges, antique furniture no one was allowed to sit on. Our living room looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. You just couldn't breathe in it. My mother ran the household like a corporate brand. Every meal was an event, every photograph a performance. She hosted charity luncheons not to help, but to be seen helping. I used to count how many times she said prestigious in a single dinner. Record was 8. My father, as always, drifted. A professor of political history, respected by students, adored by his academic circle, but emotionally MIA at home. I remember sitting next to him at breakfast while he read the paper and nodded absently at everything I said. He nodded through most of my childhood. Then there was Leah, the golden girl. She was charming in public, cruel in private, a master manipulator from age 12. She wrecked 2 cars, flunked out of her first year of college, and dated a married tech executive by the time she was 22. But every time she came home crying, Judith wrapped her in silk and excuses. "She's sensitive," Mom would say. "She's reckless," I'd reply. "Jealousy doesn't suit you," she'd whisper. Jealousy? No, not even close. I wasn't envious of Leah's drama. I was furious at the system that rewarded it, because behind every one of her tantrums was me, picking up the financial slack. I helped her refinance debt. I co-signed a car loan she defaulted on. I covered her rent twice when she blew her savings on some fake influencer retreat. And Judith? She never said thank you. She acted like it was my duty, like quiet daughters owed their louder siblings a lifetime of silence. That was the unspoken contract in our house. Leah made the mess. I cleaned it up. Judith pretended we were normal, and my father watched it all. Mute, passive, complicit. When I started working in forensic accounting, I thought, maybe, just maybe, they'd start to respect me. I was the one who finally bought my own place, the one who didn't call for help, the one who made something of herself. But instead, Judith made a joke at every holiday dinner about how Amelia's job is basically just digging through people's garbage. Even now, I can hear her voice, crisp and dismissive. And the worst part? I let it go. I let it slide for years, because confronting it meant tearing the whole illusion apart. And for a while, I still wanted to belong. I still wanted to be accepted by people who viewed love as performance and loyalty as silence. But when I found the first document, my real birth certificate tucked inside a mislabeled file folder, I realized I had spent 30 years trying to be loyal to people who never saw me as one of them. I wasn't even their blood, and once that secret surfaced, Judith didn't try to explain. She went straight to erasure, like the truth was a PR crisis she could still contain. She called Leah, they called my aunt, they made their plan, and then came the moment I'll never forget. "We all agreed," she said. "You're not welcome at your father's birthday." Not, "We're hurt." Not, "Let's talk." Just exile. Immediate. Surgical. Clean. What they didn't know was that I had already prepared my response, and it wasn't going to be an argument. It was going to be a mirror. The morning of my father's birthday, I woke up knowing exactly what I was walking into. I wasn't invited. That had been made very clear. But I was going anyway, not to crash it, not to beg, and certainly not to cause a scene. I went because I had earned the right to be there. More than any of them. I had spent the past 3 weeks gathering everything. Emails, financial records, photographs, even voice memos. A full dossier. I didn't need to scream. I had proof. Judith thought she controlled the narrative. But she'd forgotten what I do for a living. I'm a forensic accountant. I don't guess. I trace. The venue was exactly what I expected. A hired estate in Litchfield with candlelit tables, classical string quartet, and a white tie dress code. No one had the spine to break. I wore a black suit, no frills, no jewelry, no smile, just the drive and my laptop. The valet blinked when I gave him my name. You're not on the list. I smiled politely. But I'm the reason this event exists. Before he could ask more, Leah appeared at the front steps. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Amelia, what are you doing here? Just saying hello, I replied. You need to leave. I will. Soon. I walked past her. Guests turned to stare, but no one said a word, just murmurs. That same thick silence people use when pretending to be polite while watching something come undone. Judith was inside, flanked by distant cousins and an interior decorator she'd somehow befriended. She froze when she saw me. Her wineglass didn't. I nodded at her. Evening. This is not the time, she said, through clenched teeth. Perfect. Because I'm not here to talk. She stepped forward, trying to block me. If you do anything, I held up my hand. You don't get to threaten me. Not anymore. Then I walked toward the projector screen, toward the AV station. The tech assistant looked confused when I handed him a USB drive. There's already a video. This one's better, I said. My father deserves truth, not PR. He hesitated. I handed him a sealed envelope. Play this file, then hand him this. He looked at Judith, who was now visibly pale, then back at me, and then he did it. The slideshow started. It opened with soft piano music. Childhood photos of my father, academic achievements, warm images of him with students, coworkers, exactly what they were expecting. Until it wasn't. Halfway through, the images faded to black, and a new voice spoke. Mine. I grew up believing family meant loyalty, that it meant sacrifice. But sometimes, loyalty is weaponized by those who never intended to give it back. A beat. Then documents filled the screen. Redacted emails between Judith and Leah, financial statements showing misuse of inheritance funds, a scanned letter Judith had sent to her sister 15 years ago, discussing how to deal with the adopted one. Gasps, chairs scraping. Judith stood frozen. Leah bolted out the side door, and my father sat still, watching. I saw his eyes narrow. I saw his hand tighten around the program in his lap, and when the video ended, the tech handed him the envelope I'd left. Inside was the original birth certificate, a photo of my biological mother, and a simple note, in my handwriting. You always deserved the truth, even if they didn't think you could handle it. Then I left. No goodbye, no glance back, just clean footsteps across polished wood. By the time I reached my car, my phone had 21 missed calls. But I didn't answer. I didn't need to. They weren't calling because they cared. They were calling because for the first time in their lives, someone had told the story without letting them edit it. By morning, the fallout had begun. Judith called 12 times before noon. She left voicemails, rambling, frantic. Her tone bounced between rage and desperation. You've embarrassed this family, Amelia. You think you're some kind of martyr? How dare you weaponize private documents? Not once did she say the word sorry. Not once did she deny the truth, either. Leah sent a single text. You didn't have to burn it all down. I didn't reply. Because I hadn't burned anything. I had simply shown the rot behind their polished walls. The headlines hit local news by Monday. Litchfield legacy under scrutiny. Funds misused in family dispute. Prominent family's adopted daughter exposes secrets at gala. It wasn't national news. Not scandalous enough. But in our town, it was everything. Old colleagues of Dad's started calling him. Former students. Neighbors who'd once smiled through clenched teeth now offered quiet nods in the grocery store. He stayed silent for 3 days. Then he called. His voice was low, hesitant. I saw everything, he said. I waited. You were right, he continued. About all of it. Another pause. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Those words, simple, late, imperfect, hit harder than the entire slideshow. He hadn't defended me when I was 17, hadn't questioned why his daughter left the party in tears, hadn't followed up when Judith rewrote the story. But he was here now, owning it. I left the house, he added. Judith. She doesn't see what she's done. I tried to explain, but she's still performing. I exhaled slowly. It wasn't joy I felt. It was release. Finally, someone else saw the lie. I'm staying at a hotel for now, he said, but I'd like to meet you. Just talk. I agreed. That afternoon, we sat on a park bench near the university. No cameras, no wine glasses, no curated conversations. Just me and my father. Older, now. Quiet. "When did it get this bad?" he asked. I looked him in the eye. "It always was. You just didn't see it." He nodded. "I remember when we adopted you," he said. "Judith framed it like a temporary arrangement. Said we were doing a favor, but you were never a favor to me." Silence. Then he added, almost to himself, "She hated that I loved you without hesitation." That was the first time he said it aloud, and it changed something in both of us. We talked for hours about the years lost, about the silence he regrets, about what it means to start over, not from scratch, but from truth. Before he left, he handed me a key. "To the lake house," he said. "You always loved it more than anyone." I didn't cry. I just nodded and slipped the key into my coat pocket. That night, I slept like I hadn't in years. No pacing, no weight on my chest, just stillness. And in that stillness, something new took root. Not vengeance, not pride, but peace. Not because the past had been fixed, but because I had stopped letting it define me. 3 months later, I moved into the lake house. It was quiet in the way cities never are. No footsteps above me, no phones ringing in the next room, just the creak of old floorboards and the sound of the wind weaving through pine trees. I didn't tell anyone I was moving. Not Judith, not Leah, not even extended family. It wasn't secrecy, it was sovereignty. I had spent too many years narrating my choices for people who only used that information to control me. Now, I simply lived. I repainted the shutters, restored the dock, started keeping sourdough starter and black coffee in the fridge. Little things, but each of them mine. On Mondays and Thursdays, I worked remotely, consulting for tech startups, managing portfolios for women-owned businesses. I helped them build what I never had. Financial independence untouched by guilt. On weekends, I walked through the woods or read on the back porch with a blanket and a pencil in hand. Once, I even printed out old family photos and burned the ones that felt dishonest. Not out of spite, out of clarity, because I was done preserving illusions. Around this time, I started recording voice notes, short stories of what had happened. Not for a podcast, not for clicks, just for me. Each night before bed, I played one back, not because I needed to remember the pain, but because I needed to hear the sound of myself speaking truth without flinching. By month 5, women from my past started reaching out. Coworkers, cousins, even Leah's old friends. They'd seen the video, read the op-eds, watched from the sidelines, and now they wanted to know how I did it. "How did you leave? How did you stay calm? Weren't you afraid they'd ruin you?" I told them the truth. They already tried, and I was still standing. One woman, Rachel, shared that her mother had blackmailed her into staying in a job she hated. Another said her brother used her credit to cover his startup debt. They cried. They apologized for not seeing me sooner. I never asked them to. I wasn't interested in redemption arcs. I was interested in freedom, and in freedom, I learned to love the sound of my own voice. Not loud, not angry, but resolute. One day, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, familiar, Judith. She wrote 5 pages. Neat cursive, no obvious lies, but no real apology either. Phrases like, "I was overwhelmed. I only wanted what was best. I didn't know how to love you properly." I read every line, then folded it quietly. I didn't burn it. I didn't frame it. I just slid it into a drawer next to my birth certificate and the old slideshow USB. Proof, not of pain, but of how far I'd come. Sometimes healing isn't loud. Sometimes it's a locked door, no longer needing a key. The email came on a Tuesday. Subject line, request for family mediation. From my sister, Leah. She wrote formally, as if addressing a business client, not the person she helped exile. "Hi Eliza, Mom and I have been speaking with a therapist. We realize the birthday incident caused unintended harm. We'd like to invite you to a family session, just to talk. Clear the air. Let us know if you're open. Halim." I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what not to say. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a screenshot, filed it next to the others. Old texts, scanned checks, the hospital form Chloe forged with my name. This wasn't a peace offering. It was damage control. And they wanted closure. But closure is a luxury for people who didn't destroy the house and then ask the burned homeowner to sit down for tea. That Friday, I had a new routine. Brunch with my mentor, Clarice, a retired lawyer who now taught women like me how to rebuild. She looked at the email, nodded once, and said, "You don't owe them access just because they finally recognized your worth." I smiled into my coffee. Exactly. But life, of course, doesn't pause for poetic endings. The following week, I got a call from the attorney managing our father's old estate. There had been a clause in the original family trust that hadn't surfaced until now, something Leah and Judith had hidden. A share of equity in a coastal property sold 5 years ago, an asset under my name, worth over 6 figures, unclaimed, because they'd forged a document claiming I relinquished rights to it. The lawyer was livid. "It's fraud," he said. "Clear as day. You could press charges." I looked out the window, considering the weight of that option. "Or," he added, "we can file to reassign it properly, quietly, no courtroom drama." I chose the second because this wasn't about revenge. This was about reclamation. A week later, $126,000 landed in my account. I didn't text them. I didn't gloat. I simply transferred a portion into a grant fund, Women Rebuilding from Family Financial Abuse. The first scholarship, awarded to a woman whose brother had taken out student loans in her name. Sometimes you don't fight back with fists. You build better weapons. Stability, dignity, silence, sharpened to a blade. That evening, I walked along the lake, wind slicing across the water like glass. I stopped by the pier where a teenage girl sat sketching quietly. "Nice view," I said. She nodded. "I come here when my mom yells too much." I sat beside her for a moment. No advice, no backstory, just presence. Eventually, she asked, "You live around here?" "Yeah," I said. "Used to live somewhere louder." She didn't ask where. She didn't need to. And I didn't feel the need to explain, because survival doesn't always need narration. Sometimes it just needs space. Weeks passed. No new calls, no texts, just a long, deliberate silence from the people who once couldn't go a day without reminding me I owed this family everything. And I didn't miss it. I thought, maybe this is what peace looks like. But peace has a way of being tested. It arrived in a pale blue envelope, no return address, just my name and a script that once signed my report cards. Inside, a single folded letter from my mother. "Eliza, I suppose you're expecting an apology. This is not that. I've thought long and hard about what happened, and though I regret how things unfolded, I cannot change what I believed in that moment. I was trying to protect the family. Maybe I was wrong, but I did what I thought was best." I folded the letter, then unfolded it again. No admission. No, I was wrong. No, I'm sorry. Just the same gaslight in a prettier envelope. She hadn't changed. She'd just gotten better at cloaking her control in sorrow. I poured a glass of wine, sat on my balcony, and held that letter up to the last rays of sunlight. Then I burned it, not out of rage, out of finality, because not every story gets a clean ending. Some just stop. And some people don't deserve another conversation, not even to say goodbye. A few days later, I got an email from Leah again. Subject line, "Please read." The message was short. "They're selling the house. Mom's moving into a condo near Aunt Viv. She asked if you'd want to walk through it one last time. You know, for closure." Closure? They love that word, as if the only thing standing between us and a shiny Christmas card family portrait is one last awkward tour of the hallway where I was once told to make myself smaller. I didn't reply, not because I was still angry, but because I wasn't. I was indifferent. Indifference is colder than hate, because hate still burns with connection. Indifference means you finally untied the last knot. And so, I didn't go back. I didn't walk those hallways. I didn't pause in front of the kitchen door where she dismissed me like a stranger. Instead, I met with the nonprofit team funding our financial resilience program. I signed off on a new partnership that would double our outreach next quarter. Later that night, I stood on a stage introducing the first recipient of the Eliza Martin Fund. Her story? She walked out on a family who forged her name on medical debt, and now she was starting med school. When the applause ended, I said one thing. Sometimes, healing isn't about returning to where you were hurt. It's about creating something strong enough that it can't be taken away again. And in that moment, I didn't think of the party I was never invited to. I didn't think of the living room I would never return to. I thought of the life I was building, brick by honest brick. I used to think family was a static concept, a sealed box with predetermined names and roles. You're the daughter, you obey, they're the parents, they decide, and you spend your life negotiating your worth inside someone else's blueprint. But loss has a way of cracking that box wide open. And once the truth seeps through, there's no unseeing what was always broken. When I let go of trying to fix them, something unexpected happened. I found people who didn't need fixing to love me back. It started small. With Ava, the barista at the cafe downstairs, who saved me a seat near the window every morning, even on weekends. With Jordan, a lawyer who'd helped me with Chloe's financial mess, then stayed to help me build a nonprofit from scratch. With Olivia, a podcast listener from Nebraska, who sent me an email after my second episode that simply read, "Your story gave me the courage to say no to my father's guilt trip. Thank you. I didn't know I was allowed." Those were the people who began showing up, not out of obligation, not out of blood, but out of resonance. We didn't share DNA. We shared clarity. One night, I hosted a dinner in my small Portland apartment. It wasn't fancy, just roasted vegetables, red wine, warm bread. The table was mismatched. One guest sat on a folding chair. But the conversation, it felt like home. No one asked me to prove myself. No one compared me to Chloe. No one kept score of what I'd done for them or what they'd done for me. And for the first time in my life, I understood something powerful. Family isn't who you were born into. It's who you're allowed to breathe beside. After dinner, Jordan stayed behind to help clean up. As we loaded dishes, she turned to me and said, "You know what your real power is, Eliza? You didn't become them. You didn't let their betrayal turn you cruel." I didn't answer right away, because part of me had wanted to. I'd wanted revenge, proof, applause. But what I'd built instead was stronger. Not loud, not viral, but solid. It was a life no one could exile me from. A table I had set myself, one seat at a time. That week, I published a new episode of the podcast. Title, Chosen Families and the Gift of Saying No. I read a letter from a listener who had just left a toxic household. Then I spoke, steady and low. You're not selfish for walking away. You're not cruel for choosing peace over performance. And you're not wrong for building a life that finally feels like yours. After I hit upload, I sat back and watched the comments roll in. One said, "I've been waiting my whole life for someone to say this out loud." Another, "I thought I was alone. Thank you." And as I read each one, I didn't think of Evelyn or Chloe or the house they sold without a goodbye. I thought of my younger self, sitting in the attic, holding a hospital form with a stranger's name and wondering who she really was. She wasn't lost. She was becoming. And now she had arrived. People always call you strong, like it's a compliment. You're so resilient. You always bounce back. You never let things get to you. They say it like it's a superpower, but what they don't say is this: strength is often just survival in disguise, and surviving always has a cost. For years, I was the one who handled it. The overdue bills, the hospital forms, the crisis calls at midnight when Chloe's launch failed again, and my mother's blood pressure spiked from worry. I stayed quiet. I paid the bills. I gave and gave until my name was no longer Eliza Martin. It was, "She'll fix it." But being the strong one doesn't mean you're unbreakable. It just means you've gotten really good at bleeding in private. The hardest part of cutting ties wasn't the silence from my family. It was the silence inside me. The part that kept asking, what if I had stayed a little longer? What if I had explained it better? What if I was the problem all along? That's what strength looks like when no one's watching, second-guessing your boundaries, grieving people who never chose you, wondering if being free is worth feeling so alone. But here's the truth, no one tells you. Being the strong one doesn't mean you never collapse. It means you learned how to rebuild, quietly, painfully, and without applause. And I did. I rebuilt everything they thought I couldn't without them. My credit score, my peace, my ability to wake up and not dread another phone call with a favor buried inside it. I didn't throw a revenge party. I just stopped answering the door, and that quiet exit, it burned them more than anything I could have shouted. Months passed. I heard rumors. Chloe's brand collapsed after 2 major vendors pulled out. Apparently, someone had flagged suspicious financial reports. Her face disappeared from the homepage. Then, from Instagram. Then, from memory. My mother moved in with a cousin. Apparently, she was shocked. No one offered to take her in, especially me. She sent one email, just one line. I suppose this is what happens when daughters stop caring. I didn't reply, because she was wrong. I never stopped caring. I just stopped sacrificing myself to prove it. One Sunday afternoon, I sat on my balcony, warm coffee in hand, listening to an old playlist from high school. The girl in those songs, the one who once thought love had to be earned through obedience, through silence, she felt like someone else. And maybe she was, because this version of me, she doesn't apologize for not picking up the pieces anymore. She doesn't need to be the strong one for people who watched her drown and still asked for more. She just is calm, clear, and finally free. I wrote the email at 2:13 a.m. on a night when the silence felt too loud. It wasn't planned, it wasn't angry, just necessary. I didn't send it, but I never deleted it either. It sat in my drafts folder, subject line blank, addressed to 3 people, Chloe, Evelyn, Harold, my sister, my mother, my father. Here's what it said. I don't know what hurts more, that you believed her without question, or that you were relieved to have a reason to push me out. I used to think love was about proving your worth. I used to think maybe if I worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, helped enough, I'd finally be enough. But I see it now. You didn't want a daughter. You wanted an extension of yourselves. Someone to mirror back the version of family you could show to the world. When I stopped performing, you called me difficult, unpredictable, ungrateful. But here's the truth. I was always loyal. You just mistook my silence for weakness. You thought I would never leave, that I would always pick up the phone, that I would keep sacrificing my time, my money, my peace, just to be allowed a seat at a table you built on lies. So let me be clear, you won't get another dollar, you won't get another apology, and you definitely won't get another version of me that makes you comfortable. This isn't revenge, it's reality. You made your choice, now you live with it, and I finally live for myself. Goodbye. Eliza. I never hit send. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't need to anymore. The silence was louder than any message. The absence, more powerful than confrontation. They could check the bank accounts. They could watch the headlines. They could stare at the empty chair at family holidays and pretend they didn't know why it was vacant. But they knew. I wasn't missing. I was done. And for once in my life, that felt like closure. The first snow fell early that year, Portland blanketed in silence and white, as if the city itself understood the need to wipe the slate clean. I sat by the window of my small apartment, a mug of black coffee in one hand, and a new contract in the other, signed and sealed. My podcast, Money and Boundaries, had just hit its 1 millionth download. A book deal followed, speaking engagements, a TEDx invite, but more than any of that, I could finally sleep without checking my phone, waiting for chaos to pull me back. The woman who once begged her family to see her was now seen by strangers across the world, not for her pain, but for her clarity. One night, while reviewing guest pitches for the show, I saw it. An email from Evelyn. No subject line, no greeting. Just one sentence. You won. I hope it was worth it. I didn't reply, not out of pettiness, but because I didn't play that game anymore. This wasn't about winning. It was about walking away from a rigged board. Weeks later, a delivery arrived. No note, just a sealed envelope inside a simple wooden box. I opened it. Inside, a photo. Me, at 9 years old, standing on the beach, hair wild, eyes bright, holding a seashell to my ear like it was the universe whispering back, and scrawled in Evelyn's unmistakable handwriting on the back. She was always too free to belong to me. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even recognition. But it was something. A confession, maybe. Or a final surrender. I didn't frame the photo, didn't burn it either. I placed it at the bottom of a locked drawer, not out of resentment, but as a reminder that the past doesn't vanish. It evolves. That night, I walked to the edge of the river, snow crunching beneath my boots. I stood beneath the iron bridge, lights glowing above me like quiet constellations. I whispered aloud, to no one in particular, I'm still here. Not as their daughter, not as their scapegoat, not even as their memory, but as Eliza, whole, free, unapologetically herself. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about reclamation. And somewhere out there, someone else is sitting in silence. Someone else is being told to not make a scene, to be smaller, quieter, easier. If that's you, let me say this. You don't have to burn bridges, but you don't have to stay on them while they collapse. Build your own ground. Name your own value. And if they say you're too much, smile. They've finally noticed. The snow fell heavier now, and I turned back toward home. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning. They say forgiveness is for the strong. I say discernment is stronger, because here's the truth no one wants to admit. Some wounds don't heal, they just stop bleeding. And you learn to walk with the scar, not as a sign of weakness, but as proof you made it out alive. For most of my life, I thought love meant endurance, meant staying, meant giving until I had nothing left but the smile they expected. I called it family. They called it normal. But what it really was conditional loyalty wrapped in tradition. And once I saw it clearly, I couldn't unsee it. This story may have started with betrayal, but it didn't end there. It ended in a choice. To stop explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. To stop showing up for those who only applauded when I was useful, not when I was human. To stop mistaking survival for belonging. Now, when people ask about my past, I don't flinch. I don't edit. I say, I was raised in a house where silence was louder than truth, where expectations crushed authenticity, where being different was dangerous. And I made it out, not just intact, but luminous. And if you're reading this, if you've ever been left out, written off, or told you were too much, here's what I know. You are not too much. You were just never in the right room. Leave it. Build your own. Invite only those who speak in honesty, who honor your boundaries, who don't demand you shrink so they can shine. To my younger self, you were never broken. You were never too sensitive. You were never the problem. You were just surrounded by people who didn't know what to do with someone like you. And that's okay. Because now you do. To the ones who turned their backs, thank you. You taught me the difference between being kept and being chosen, and I choose myself now. This isn't just my story. It's a mirror for anyone who's ever questioned their worth, because the people closest to them couldn't see it. To you, I offer this truth. You are not hard to love. You were just born to love, harder than they were capable of receiving, and that isn't your burden to carry. As I close this chapter, I carry no rage, no vengeance, just clarity. And in that clarity, there is peace. Not the peace of being accepted, but the peace of no longer needing to be. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge is not in proving them wrong. It's in becoming exactly who they tried to silence and letting your life speak louder than their absence. I am Eliza Martin, and I was never disposable. I was just waiting for the day I'd remember I never needed their permission to begin.